International Mountain Bicycling Association. So we have been working hard, as I mentioned, and we have had significant community impact. As most of you know, I'm very much concerned about the health of our community, and this Trail Alliance is impacting our community in these three significant areas: overall health, impacting family, and the economy. Just as a note, for those of you who aren't familiar, mountain biking, there was a study done in 2014 in Oak Ridge, Colorado, which was a dying lumber town. And Oak Ridge, Oregon. Thank you. I was wondering why you were.
Oak Ridge boys will not forgive you for that one.
And yeah, so my head's in Colorado, I think. Anyway, the study finds that there's mountain biking brings in about $2.1 to over $4 million in direct spending to that small community on an annual basis. It's also recognized by Travel Oregon and as well as the Oregon Coast Visitors Association as a significant driver of tourism and tourism dollars.
That's in one community?
That's in Oak Ridge.
Wow.
That's in Oak Ridge, yeah. So the numbers for Oregon are much bigger. So we've been making a difference. And so far, we've got over 1,000 volunteer hours. We're working with a lot of local partners to get stuff done. We've cleaned up the forest as an example. This was behind the Pipeline Road, behind the column. And in just about 3 hours, we filled a 20-yard bin of household trash. Which I might add was completely nasty. A lot of hypodermic needles and other nasty stuff. We've been maintaining our trails. We've been creating new opportunities for our youth. This is a pump track in Seaside at Cartwright Park. We've been sponsoring events on the left here on the coast. This is the first annual Cannon Beach Fat Bike Festival, and there were 45, I believe, participants. And on the right-hand side was our third go at the International Take a Kid Mountain Biking Day. As you can see, it's a family event. So we also want to create world-class opportunities for Clatsop County. And this picture is taken from the top of the area that we're actually looking at. That is Sugarloaf Peak in the background and Onion Peak just over to the right. And the group of riders there are looking from the ridge down into Seaside. You like this slide, guys? So this is what we have to do to travel to get to mountain bike specific trails. Hood River, 152 miles away. Sandy Ridge, 130. Elsie Falls, 199. This is between Eugene and Corvallis. Oak Ridge, which is not in Colorado. Phil's Trails, this is in Bend. And Clutchie Creek, 22. That's from this point on the map. From this point where we are all sitting tonight, it's 22 miles from here. And this, I'm going to pass it off to Chris now. This is a map of the area that we've started working on.
Yeah, so what you see there in the red lines are areas we've flagged already for phase 1 of the trails that we're proposing, and that whole area is the Clutchie Basin, and we've kind of got that eyeballed as future trails to kind of encompass the whole area. But working with Greenwood, we've talked about phase 1 being from the top where you see up there near the Twin Peaks, all the way down, and then splitting off at the bottom and getting to the county park at Clutchie. The yellow area is on county land, and it's also a trail. We've just identified that separately because it's not on Greenwood's property. It's on the county property, and that would get us back to the parking lot. It's about 6 miles of trail and 6 miles of single track. That doesn't include any of the up routes that we would take with roads or any other routes out. So that's quite a bit. How do I go?
Yeah, that one.
Our timeline in general, we're looking to get the agreement signed. We're working on that right now. David's here from Greenwood, and we've been working together on that, and there's, we're going back and forth with some changes, but we're getting real close to getting that done. So we've already identified and flagged 6 miles of trail, like I just showed you, and then we received a grant for $25,000 for a master plan to hire somebody to plan all of the trail that we would be envisioning over time up there. So we've received that. We're going to start talking to we already have started talking with master planners. And in the meantime, once we get the agreement signed, we're going to start on our volunteer trail building, which would be just getting all of us in the green shirts out there and getting in the dirt and starting the process, which is exciting when I think about it. And in the meantime, we're going to get that master plan completed, which would be all of the other trail that we haven't flagged already, just, again, that vision. And then we would be looking for additional funding all the way along, fundraising and grant writing to find additional funds to help us with the trail builder, because at some point we're going to want to bring in professional trail building to help us do quality trail, provide really well-built trail, as well as speed up the process a little bit. So we'll be doing that in the meantime. By December, we could see the first 3 to 5, maybe 6 miles being completed, so we can start riding, although there'll be shorter amounts than that to start riding sooner than that. I'm going to hand off some.
Go back. Okay, you're, yeah.
It's loud. Yeah, so like these guys said, NCTA is a subchapter of Northwest Trail Alliance. We're Oregon's actually largest trail advocacy organization and stewardship organization of any user kind. We contribute about over 10,000 hours every year of volunteer stewardship to public lands in the state of Oregon. Have about 1,200 members, are based in Portland, and work on trails basically from the west side of Mount Hood, the Gifford Pinchot and the Gorge, and then all the way out here to the coast. And like I said, our job is really to support Northwest Trail Alliance and members out here, providing them both support in materials, expertise, guidance, obviously legal advice as well, and just excited to help connect them to the broader Oregon Trails community as well. NWTA is one of the conveners of the Oregon Mountain Bike Coalition, which will be a statewide advocacy organization speaking up for trails everywhere across the state. And so we're kind of helping connect NCTA with people in Klamath Falls, people in Oak Ridge, getting them excited to come out here and experience surf and turf for recreation. And yeah.
So we've had a couple different meetings, and we've walked around the site and looked at it, and through Colucci Creek Park, and it just seems like a good fit for this trail area because the main logging road comes right through the park, as you know, and then the main line, the Colucci Creek main line logging road is on the border of the park, which a lot of the trails are going to tee off of. So it's a very short distance from the existing parking lot in the park, and it just seems like a good fit. Since the tree has fallen, the spruce tree fell in 2007, that park has just gone downhill. There's not much there. There's still a good attraction as far as the river and the fishing and stuff like that, but I think this would be a good addition to the park. It's a perfect spot for what we're doing, looking at. So, and the Rec Lands Committee, we've had several discussions about it, and everyone seems real supportive of it so far.
You mind hitting the next slide? Thank you. Just wanted to point out some of the benefits that we would all get from this collaboration together. One of them is the increased recreational use of the forest land. As the largest forest or the largest land manager in the county, there's not a ton of recreation that happens out on those forest lands. So this is an excellent opportunity to bring an extra user base that hasn't always been present in this county. So it'd just be a really good way to get people outside, get them moving. And it's a safe and fun, family-friendly recreation form. I just think it will really benefit the community here. Provides a lot of positive interactions to the visitors who sometimes when they come here may not always know exactly what they want to do, but this is just one option that can really help brighten their trip. when they're out here, and it'll create excellent ties with the community, both through providing recreation for them, but also through providing new income stream through people visiting for that purpose. And it just creates a positive association with managed forests as well. So those are just a few of the benefits that I see.
It's really great that Greenwood is, embracing this program. I think it's super. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a few questions, if you're ready. Are you ready?
We're ready.
I could, if they got to the end of the line, that was a no-brainer, right? Well, so it's wonderful that you're doing this. It's great to get people outside. Bicycling is a wonderful recreational opportunity. I keep thinking about being an older person, wanting to be outdoors, and I remember being in Portland, and there were some, of course it was a Portland phenomenon, and they would never come out here and behave that way, but there were some fairly aggressive folks out on the mountain bike trails, and there were some conflicts with pedestrians and with slower bicycle riders. Do you contemplate, do you have nice wide trails? How do we deal with different skill or energy levels?
You want to say?
Yeah, I can address that real quick. I mean, I guess ideally this is a single-use trail, mountain bike specific, one-way trail where we're downhill riding, uphill riding on a different trail to avoid that conflict. I was going to say that David from Greenwood and I have had discussions about this, and that's something that they're interested in seeing and concerned about. So you guys can also address it too.
Yeah, I mean, mountain bike trails are not new at all to the entire world, and so they've been working on this conflict and sorting that out for a long time. So there are models to follow, and we have learned a lot, so we can do better with it. But primarily, these trails are going to be optimized for mountain biking.
Do you want me or I can?
Does that answer your question?
I think so. That's part of the question, because
I think, and the one thing that we talked about in the park was the launch point of this was having a separate trail that leaves the park that is for the mountain bikers. So the guy that comes out to walk down the river to go fishing or swimming, they're on one trail, the bikers are on this trail, so we separate that user conflict at that point, and then it's just bikers against bikers on the trail. So then it's just bike ethics there. I mean, it's going to be a mountain bike trail, so I don't think you're going to find the person on a slow little Schwinn bike out there that's going to, I think they're going to be a little more aggressive trails from what I've been told.
Yeah, and I think a big part of it is the design of the trail as well. All these will have a directional optimization to them. So basically, it's better and it's easier for both your effort and your experience to go a certain way on the trail. That's what I meant by directional optimization. And so most of your traffic for this system will be going uphill on a lot of the existing logging roads and then downhill on purpose-built, like optimized trails. It might be open to trail runners if they want, but just understanding that there's ways you can approach that with signage, for example. Say, hey, this is a downhill directional bike trail, be advised. But as your reference to Portland, we're 2.5 years into a citywide master plan for off-road cycling there. And one thing it has done is brought both the environmental community, the trail running community, and the mountain bike community closer together to work on better trail etiquette and engagement as well. So I think this project is really exciting, being able to use those resources from another place and apply it with a little bit of twist that fits this site best as possible.
great. I'm glad to hear that, because I think it's important that it encompasses as wide a spectrum as possible, as safely and politely as possible. So that's great.
And also, from our discussions, the NCTA has also expressed a desire to kind of have there be a skills kind of filter, so to speak, to the trail system. So someone who maybe doesn't have as advanced skills, both whether it's their lung capacity or their bike handling ability, would be on kind of, say, these lower trails, if you think up a mountain, that are, say, green rated, like a ski hill. But then a lot of the folks that want to wear those helmets and look scary and go fast are probably going to be pedaling farther up the hill and on more technical trails. So there's also this differentiation between the users as well, based on the trail design and layout.
That's very sweet. Okay, but one more concern. Again, thinking about safety. We're seeing more and more vehicular traffic on highway systems, and I'm thinking, if I'm a mountain biker and maybe I want to be out on the roads as well. That's not going to happen. Okay.
People that ride mountain bikes want to ride amongst the trees, just like people that want to hike off of the roads.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Okay, good, because I've seen a lot of accidents in the last few days, and I'm just cautious about anything that increases risk for any kind of people.
What about liability?
Liability? We can start with that, and I can.
So part of our agreement is focused in around the liability and the insurance of that. And so our agreement has encompassed a certain baseline of insurance that the North Coast Trail Alliance has agreed to. And so that will cover the liability away from any land manager or themselves and go to the individual.
Are there, and maybe this is a question for county council, is there, I know when I lived in New Mexico, they had state laws that helped the issue of horse riding, that it was understood you're riding at your own risk. Do they have similar laws here in Oregon, or? I mean, this is a growing field, it's a growing segment of the population, right?
They're in a state of flux at the moment. There have been laws on the books, they've been challenged, they're doing a revision. I'm sure it will eventually be fully in place, but it's still being shaken out at present.
Well, I think I really applaud your efforts. I think any way to increase recreation among our population, especially get them out into our beautiful forests, it's a great, worthwhile effort. So thank you.
Any other questions or comments for our presenters? Thank you so much for your presentation. It's very informative, and good luck.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
And you all are invited to come out and ride, and also maybe swing a Pulaski or two when we're building.
No, seriously, follow up on that.
Okay. This is an opportunity for business for the public. This is an opportunity for anyone to give a 3-minute presentation about any item on the agenda. I don't have no one's submitted any business from the public. I do have some folks that want to comment on the public hearings, and that'll be coming later in the meeting.
You do have some on business from the public.
Yeah, I do, but they're all in the public hearings.
No,
Ordinance 18?
she wants to talk on public comment process,
Oh,
like a process.
oh, okay, okay, I'm sorry.
And then this one's on Human Service Advisory.
Oh, okay, well, that's, okay, fine. Our first guest tonight is Suzanne Gladwin. Welcome, Suzanne. Please, your name and address for the record, please.
Susanna Gladwin, 82316 Highway 103, Seaside, Oregon, 97138. So this is more about procedure stuff, because at times when making a comment and things have been worked on for a really long time, it's turned out that a resistance to changing the wording because it's been worked on for so long, and yet we wait for the final product to make comments, and it just is kind of, to me, a catch-22 at times of when do you make a public comment, and yet, like with the forestry proposal, it's been 2 years in the making, and there was huge resistance on the Planning Commission to want to change things. So this is just part of procedural stuff. I just want to make a comment on that. And the other, I have a request, and I don't know if it should come from you or the Planning Commission. I would love to see also an audio from those meetings, because minutes are such a summary that it loses a lot of the finer points of discussion. And you can also, with audio, look immediately at what was discussed before waiting a month for the minutes to come out. And that's just those two things on procedural things. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next guest is Linda Crandall.
That's supposed to be for the budget.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, so, and then also, so Robert, you and Linda are going to speak on the budget issue. Okay, very good. So that concludes business from the public, and now I'd like to go back and we're going to get a motion to approve the consent calendar as presented.
So move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The next item is a public hearing. This is the time set for a public hearing on ordinance 18-02. Amendments to land and water development and the use ordinance in Clatsop County Standards Document F80, EFU, and AF zones regulations. May we have the staff report, please?
Yes. Gail Henriksen, Community Development Director. In December of 2015, the Board of Commissioners entered into a memorandum of understanding with the State Department of Land Conservation and Development. The purpose of the MOU, or Memorandum of Understanding, was to allow the state to provide us with technical assistance to update our codes. And specifically, they were providing assistance to address changes to the 3 resource zones in the county: the agricultural forestry, the exclusive farm use, and the forestry 80 zones. And what had happened is that even though we had sporadically made amendments to address issues as they were adopted by the state, we were very much behind in updating our code language. And really, since 1993, there had not been a comprehensive review and overhaul. So knowing that, the county entered into the memorandum. You appointed an ad hoc committee to work with the Planning Commission, and that group set to work in February of 2016 and continued to work through January of this year to make the changes to update the code. Probably the most notable change, and the one that's been most anticipated, relates to allowing agritourism uses, and those would be conditional uses in several of the zoning districts: the EFU, the ag forest, and then some of the residential agriculture zones. When the Planning Commission finally did begin to look at this for their final recommendation to you, there was an issue that came up at the April meeting related to language governing the siting of public utilities necessary, or utility facilities necessary for public service. State statute 215, ORS 215.175 specifically excludes the county or any local government from applying siting criteria to facilities that are regulated by FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. So that is state law. We did receive requests in April, after we had gone through several iterations with this, that language be removed. And so when the Planning Commission did make their final recommendation in May, on May 8th, they did recommend that the board take that language out. Based on information from the county's Land Use Council, Chris Crean, and also from Tim Murphy, who's the Farm Forest Specialist with Department of Land Conservation and Development, we can take that out, but it will still apply because it is in state statute. So the ordinance that you see here tonight does have that language stricken out and taken out, but again, just be aware that ultimately, when push does come to shove, that it is state statute. So,
Excuse me.
Yes.
I've read through this, but I don't remember the page number that particular language is on. Do you know that?
I don't have page numbers on my version of it. It's in the section that's in the standards document, and it's in the standards document, it's section 3.563. No, sorry, take that back.
Is it 3.506?
3.506 3A7. So if you look at the siting criteria require a utility to prove that it has to go through farmland, that they don't have any other options. So that's one of the criteria. That cost cannot be the sole consideration for putting a utility through farmland. That if they do get the approval, that they have to restore the land as quickly as possible to the way that it was before they disturbed it. It also allows the county to impose clear and objective conditions for approval. It allows the utilities to provide on-site and off-site improvements, which would include temporary workforce housing for the workers constructing the utility. And then it talks some more about sewer systems as well. The seventh criteria specifically says the provisions of subsection A, which I've just summarized for you, do not apply to interstate natural gas pipelines and associated facilities authorized by and subject to regulation by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And that's direct language out of state statute. So we have shown number 7 as being removed per the request of the Planning Commission. And that basically summarizes my report, and I'm happy to try and answer any questions you might have.
Okay, may we have the first reading by short title only?
wait,
We're going to get to that. We'll get to questions here.
Oh, I thought she.
We're just going to have the first reading, and then we're going to open the public hearing for testify and staff response and commissioners' questions and comments.
Okay. All right. Ordinance 1802, an ordinance adopting legislative text amendments to the Land and Water Development and Use Ordinance 80-14 and to the Clatsop County Standards document related to uses and development standards in the exclusive farm use EFU, Forestry 80, F80, and Agriculture Forestry AF zones.
Great, thank you. I will now open the public hearing. If you wish to testify, come forward and give your name and address for the record. You have 3 minutes. Is there anyone tonight that wants to testify on ordinance 18-02? Okay. Is there? There's no. Oh, there is. Come on up and say your name and address for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
You guys are fast.
Sorry, I didn't see you over there.
My name is Teresa Retzloff. I live at 89578 Highway 202, Astoria, Oregon 97103. I was actually a member of the ad hoc committee that spent the 2 years reviewing all of this really interesting language to update this land use code. And I am also the owner-operator of 46 North Farm. We're located out in Olney. And so my main focus and interest in this was with regards to the agritourism activities that this was going to allow. And really, I just want to speak up in support of the work that we did and the language that we worked very hard to include in this that would allow for these kinds of activities on agricultural lands. I think that this is a really important way for local agriculture to expand their economic resources and to provide opportunities for small farm direct market gardeners and farmers in our area to be more economically viable. I also really want to encourage the Commission to reflect and understand that because of the nature of the history of agriculture in Clatsop County, really since I would say the last 40, 50 years, there was a lot of small-scale agriculture happening in Clatsop County, I would say like up to the end of World War II. And after that point, it really declined. And so a lot of the land that maybe had been used as agriculture, that maybe had been zoned ag forest or larger parcels of land, ended up, I think, having houses built on them. And a lot of those things are now the R5, R2, R1 zones. Those are still lands that it's totally appropriate to do agriculture in, and in fact, there are many examples around the country of very profitable and viable farms that operate on the R5, R2, 5 acres, 2 acres, half an acre. You can produce a lot of food, you can grow a lot of great things, you can absolutely be a good small farm at those levels. And I just want to encourage you to think about that in some of the considerations. Personally, our farm is zoned ag forest, and so we're good with a lot of this, but I have a lot of other small farmers in my community, and I see myself as part of a community of small farms that are trying to build a healthy regional food system in our area. And I just really want to encourage you to think about those lands that are zoned, maybe not agriculture, residential, in those transitional zones between agriculture and urban, as being places where agriculture can happen, and a lot of really effective growing is going on there. So I hope that you're able to support this change. I think it's going to be a really great thing for Clatsop County. And thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I want to say, if I could, thank you for all of the hard work you put into informing so many of us for so many years about the viability and the hard work required to have an alternative food system in this county. I really am grateful to you.
Thank you, Leanne. I appreciate that.
I also like to ask a question.
Yes.
You want to ask the guest a question?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, Teresa. Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for coming tonight.
You're very welcome. I'm happy to be here.
So the suggestion of being open to smaller farms, is there anything in the language that you see that would prohibit that at this point?
I think that there are, I mean, it's a really big document, and that's not necessarily my strong point. So, you know, I think that your staff would probably be better able to go into the specifics of what's allowed in the different zones. I know that there are some additional restrictions in some of the R1, 2, and 5 zones. And I understand why they're there, because those are more densely populated areas. I would just give you an example of why sometimes that, you know, like the flexibility of thought about that. My friend Sam Swellen is here this evening, and I hope that he speaks. He and his partner Kelly operate Spring Up Farm out in Napa. They are zoned R5. And if anyone has ever been to their farm stand at Sunday Market, you would know that they are producing a heck of a lot of food, and it's beautiful, and they are a very viable farm, but they are zoned R5. And so there are going to be some things that they're not allowed to do potentially on their farmland that I would totally be allowed to do on my farmland, but we are essentially in the same business doing the same thing. And it's just the luck of the draw that that was the land that they were able to access and purchase to farm. And I was able to purchase and farm ag forestry land, but I think that's part of the history of Clatsop County and how our land use has changed over time. Agriculture not super popular in the 70s and 80s, but now there's a recognition that, you know, small-scale local food systems are important, and this is also an asset, I think, for, when we look at tourism and visitors coming to this region. You know, agriculture, food tourism is something that's really growing in this area, and I think having this kind of vibrant food system is not only for ourselves as a community to be resilient and more self-sufficient for ourselves as the residents of Clatsop County, but also to enhance the experience of people coming to this region and experiencing, you know, all the things that we have to offer here. So I'm just asking that be in your minds, and I don't know how much that's necessarily going to apply to the changes that are happening now, but maybe I just want to speak up to say that I think that there just needs to be some flexibility, and sometimes just a straight across the board, this can only happen on lands that are technically agricultural. It would really limit the opportunities for a lot of our growing number of small farms where those lands are maybe the ones that they could afford, and that land was once part of a much larger agricultural property. But now it's been split up, and so anyway, that was. Thank you. Thanks.
So we're going to bring staff back up. And did you have any response to the public testimony? And also, I would ask if there's any questions. Oh, Suzanne, did you want to testify in the public hearing? Yes. Okay.
And Sam, were you
Sam, did you want to come up too? Oh, sorry. Go ahead and.
These were underlines from that was in your packet, but as I think
It's a huge packet, thank you.
underline some things that I want to address.
Is this different than the letter that was included?
No, it's the
This
letter
is,
highlighted
I
for
chopped
us.
that up, some of it's chopped up, my comments are chopped up.
Okay.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Susanna Gladwin, 82316 Highway 103, Seaside, Oregon, 97138. The comments, when we went before the Planning Commission, Dan Sears' comments on, which I think also because we are a home rule county, that we can add in more protection than just what the state statutes are, which really say on forest lands, you can frack, you can do all sorts of mineral extractions. It's an industry written no holds barred pretty much, though the definition of forest lands is for good soil, good water, but the actual implementation of uses permitted in that document is pretty extreme, I think. The last piece of my theme is from Science Daily, because I couldn't print out the Daily Astorian article on methane releases off the Columbia River mouth in the Columbia River Canyon, offshore Ocean Canyon. already there's a big methane proposal for, I think it's Port Westward in Clatsop for methane to go to China for making plastic. So Dan Sears has some very specific comments that I have underlined that could be added in. It got kind of sidelined because I mentioned exclusive farm use, which is a legislated use, and being able to change exclusive farm use wording, I think, is a different ball of wax than FA and ag forestry and F80. And I think whether or not the way it's worded, we could use forest as primarily carbon capture, it's very much worded as cutting trees for lumber and making income that way. Though I think carbon investment is going to be a big deal in the future, and what better way for carbon capture is to let trees grow, and with our climate issues so critical for our future, I think it's really important, if nothing else, in this document to say trees, a use for forest trees is carbon capture. I think it's a strong comment. And also when you read it about woody debris and using it for biomass burning for energy production, which releases carbon dioxide, woody debris in the forest floor is very important for soil. And another comment I made. And I think that's pretty much what that covers, that I've highlighted some of those things. And I just wanted to say from what Teresa said, if I can have another moment of my zoning,
I'll give you a few more.
that my 21 acres, which is actually 17 farmable acres, they finally give me that concession, is a R5, residential 5 zoning, which has a very high tax rate because of potential for riverside development. I have always farmed it, and I probably could get a farming zoning. There's a whole other backstory that's complicated, but it's a way. There's a big push for taxes, and the biggest tax way is to have developable land. I'm not being very clear here, but the R5 residential 5-acre development, which is what mostly Jewel is, brings in a lot more money, and I have to show farm income, and that's fine, but I should be zoned farm. And it's a hassle for me when they really are pressuring me. And it took us an hour at the assessor's office to get everything, all the things, I's dotted, T's crossed. Anyway, just wanted to comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Susanna.
We have another guest. Come on up. State your name and address for the record, please.
Sam Sulian, 92430 Coppish Road, Astoria.
Thanks for coming in, Sam.
Thanks for having me. I wanted to say I really appreciate the addition of the agritourism into the RA zones. As Teresa mentioned, I am one of the 2 people that run Spring Up Farm, which is a small farm out in Napa, and it is zoned RA5. One of the issues that we were talking about getting into was trying to set up some agritourism options and looking into that, and until this was even presented, that wasn't a real possibility. And at this point, some of the minor issues that I've noticed is just that the exclusive farm use has a longer list of things that they are allowed to do on that property that is then not at all included on the other. And I think part of that is that those properties tend to have to be of a larger size to be zoned. Exclusive farming, they had to be more than the 5 acres that I currently own. Some of those would be specifically to ag business stuff. Some of those would be more specifically to tourism things. So my hope going forward is that we could continue to allow for possibly more tourism options there. Some of the things people have brought up that I know in the smaller things are farm stays, there are a lot of people that really like the idea of going to a small farm. One of the issues that this has is that you wouldn't really be allowed to use any outbuilding as any sort of place to stay, and it would potentially be a lot of effort and trial to set up a system to allow for something like that versus some of the other agritourism. So I just wanted to throw out the concept that these smaller farms are also interested in the same deal that some of the exclusive farmers' property is allowed, because they're doing the same, essentially the same business on a different zoned property that may even be adjacent.
Well, typically, we don't ask, back and forth questions to public testimony. Did you have a question for staff, or did you
I have a question for him.
I'll make an exception for that. Go ahead.
So if I may just summarize what you're saying, is that the difference in scale of maybe a 5-acre farm and a larger farm has different wordings in the present, what we have, the document that we have in front of us.
Yes.
And what you're saying is you would like to see the smaller farm to be a little more inclusive in some of those uses, to also possibly to apply to a smaller farm.
Yes.
Like a short-term rental with a structure that's on a smaller farm. That's your request.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I see no more public testimony. Okay, come on up, staff, and we have some, did you have any response to any of the items brought up by the speaker?
I would just say that in terms of the agritourism uses, there is one set of conditions that apply to all the all the zoning districts when it comes to agritourism. I'd be interested in hearing some more detailed specifics about what other types of uses they think should be in there or that may be lacking. When I came in, this process was pretty much done in January when I started, so I don't have all the background information on that. Other than that, I have no other comments.
Great. I'm sure the board has some questions for staff.
As usual, we have questions. So just looking at this, I see on the summary, the next to the last line, prohibit Clatsop County from applying citing criteria. Is that S-I-T-I-G, not the C-I-T-I-N-G?
Yes, it should have been S-I-T,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, just checking, because I would think you would be like that. I am vitally interested in farming and food and how people grow it and how they get to be able to afford to maintain family farms. So my concern is that this is too much for me to absorb right now. I'm not ready to say, move it forward to a time certain. I am ready to say I want to move it to hear more information, because I really want to hear how this impacts. If we're talking about, does our home rule charter allow us to overreach state law, I want to hear more legal information about that. If we're talking about FERC and FEMA and all kinds of other people, I want to hear about farms, FERC, and FEMA. I mean, just for threes. I think that this has been a long process. When we started in 2015, we thought we'd be done by the end of that year. Not so. It turned out to be complicated for a variety of reasons. I would like us to take more time to hear more information from concerned constituents, to give staff time to be comfortable, to give the governing body time to be comfortable, because the department is called Planning and Community Development, and I think this is an essential part of community development, the legal foundation that we're revising here, and I appreciate the good work you've done. I just want to understand it better, hear more information, have time to absorb it and apply it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about that early on, and the original schedule was to continue the public hearing to June 27th. I'm looking over at staff here now. Could we extend that to help some of these commissioners to absorb this information and have their questions answered, maybe move it to July, second meeting in July, or
That would be better.
I know, but we're on kind of a time schedule here, because we're overdue with getting this done, right?
We are about a year overdue right now.
You're overdue, and
So a couple
so,
more
Right.
weeks.
so I don't think, I think we can go just another month. So I think we'll go ahead and,
And I have
I'll
some
plan to
questions.
continue the, what's the second meeting in July date?
I have a comment
Yeah, I'm
about
just going
that.
to open that back up, go ahead.
Well, you know, as we delay and we are not, I realize this was a big packet, but there are people who are waiting. I mean, this is costing them.
Right.
Because we didn't get this done, it's cost them a season. I really think we need to hurry up and do this, but there are some things in here that I would like to see changed. So perhaps we should, but let's get it done.
I
Looking at my
share
calendar right
that.
now, and,
Yeah, I share that.
Before, go ahead if you have some questions.
I'm not saying to delay this indefinitely. I'm just saying I need more input. I am new to this commission. This is 145 pages of highly technical talk, and I just need some more input on it. So I think delaying it another 2 weeks from our second hearing seems reasonable to me. But because this is the first time I've seen this in this, this is 7 years ago, 7 days ago, and you all have been working on it for a while. So is the liaison for the Farm and Forest Advisory Committee, is that Farm Forest Advisory Committee, is that now done? Is that now dissolved?
I don't know how it officially dissolves. They have not met since January of 2018, but there wasn't any official dissolution that I'm aware of.
At that point, that was sort of the completion of their role in the process.
Okay. Who was the liaison from this board for the last year? Because I saw that Dirk Rohn's name was on there. I'm wondering if was there a change in the liaison from the board to that committee?
There was no liaison. Dirk was, I don't even know that he was still on well, I guess in the beginning he was.
Well, I saw his name in his
But then
document.
later,
Yeah, he signed it as a commissioner. He was our liaison in the beginning.
Yeah.
I mean, I share your concern about not ruining another season, but,
That's not.
you know, if we balance one season with, I mean, 93 since we looked at it last, I mean, we really need to take the time to get this right. And I apologize to anyone adversely affected, but
And I just had a couple questions, what was on the staff report. Deleting the definition of yurt, why was that?
That was at the request of one of the planning commission members, and it actually came also from the farm forestry because it's actually intended to apply within urban growth boundaries.
So it's a type of structure they don't want on there? Or is it the word that they used?
I don't know if it's the word. We were asked by the state to delete it. The planning commission also did because the regulations regarding the yurts were specifically intended for the urban growth boundary areas.
Okay.
So.
And then add organic to the list of materials under mine and mining? You know what that was about?
I do not know specifically. I was at the budget hearing that day when that discussion occurred, but I can go back and listen to the audio from that.
Okay, so when I have questions, if we're not going to have a work session on this, who should I go to ask my questions? Would it be
Yeah.
you? Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I have some comments. So I am in favor of anyone and everyone being able to grow food for many reasons. It keeps space open. This is a problem across the nation. We are losing our agricultural lands because people can't keep these farms. And so they get divided up, like Teresa Retzlaff said. They get developed into housing. And then that ends up costing us in food security, and it also costs counties and cities more in services. It doesn't cost as much to service farms. And I am very much in favor of the smaller parcels being able to, I can't say I remember from reading what the restrictions are on them, but I would like to have it more generous so that they can remain. Our lands in this county is very expensive, and it's it's very difficult for someone to purchase the land and then make it profitable with just growing fruits and vegetables. But if you can imagine 1 acre of berries alone, how many people that would feed, we're talking about a lot. So any way that we can make this more generous, I'm all for. Also, when it comes to the pipeline issue, anything that will strengthen our ability to forbid or not allow, regulate another onslaught. We already went through this issue, and we don't want to do that again. Regardless of what state statutes say, we do have home rule, and I believe that we can have language that will strengthen our former position, and I believe our present position with the commission now. Whatever we can do for that.
Well, thank you. So what we're going to do is I'm going to recommend that we continue the public hearing to July 25th. This will give plenty of time for the commissioners to, work this stuff through. And Cam, did you have a comment?
No, I was just going to suggest July 11th, because that would give us another month. If we go to the end of July, we're 6 weeks out then from today.
July 11th is fine for me.
Is July 11th? Okay, then is there any more questions for staff?
I would hope we would have a work session, because I think all the commissioners should hear. I mean, if we are not clear on what the extent of our home rule authority is in the charter, I think all the commissioners want to hear that legal information. So I'd like to have a work session on it, not have us go one-on-one to staff, but all together so that we can learn together.
So so Commissioner Thompson would like maybe to have a work session on the July 11th meeting?
Or do we want to try to do it the last meeting this month? I think June 27th?
Sure.
I mean, I think we
do that,
need
then if
to
we
get,
need to adjust the language.
we need to get Chris Crean here, so we'll have to check on his schedule and see when he's available to come down from Portland.
Does that sound good to the board? If I have a work session at the next meeting and we can bring in Chris? So we'll go ahead and do that if we can get Chris here. Does that sound good, folks?
And if not, then we'll shoot for July 11th.
Okay, sounds good. Is there any more questions for staff? And I think staff's pretty clear about where we want to go here. Gail, did you have any closing comments?
I guess if I could just maybe get a more specific sense of what exactly you would like me to bring back to you. I think I'm pretty clear on what Commissioner Nebaker is looking for, but in terms of the farms, the FERCs, and the FEMA, I think we're your 3 Fs.
Well, if we're talking about, does Clatsop County as a home rule charter county have the authority to put in language that's different than the state statute? Because the way I look at the home rule charter, what it says is we get to do what we want to do unless it conflicts with state statute. So I don't think we can conflict with state statute, but I'm not an attorney, so I want to hear what Chris Crean has to say about that.
Right.
Specifically.
I do know that the state has very strong rules on agriculture and forestry, specifically to prevent counties from micro-legislating.
Yeah.
And that's been something we've talked about before.
Yeah.
When it came to like Joseph County and its spray GMO. And that was overruled by the state. So that's an interesting, we'll add some of that into the work session. Okay, so we're going to have a work session at the next meeting if we can get Chris Crean, and definitely if the board has questions about anything, just definitely move those to Gail and we'll get those, and so you know what we're looking for.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. The public hearing will be continued to July 11th. Okay, this is the next, we're going to public hearings. This is the time set for a public hearing on the fiscal year 2018-19 Clatsop County budget. May I have the staff report, please?
Good evening. At the meeting on May 8th, the Clatsop County Budget Committee approved the 18-19 proposed annual budget. In accordance with Oregon's Budget Law 294.453, the next step is to hold a public hearing on the approved budget. The purpose of this hearing is to consider testimony from any and all persons who may wish to comment on the approved budget. No action by the board is required at this time. In addition, staff is evaluating the need to request adjustments to the approved budget based on new information that was not available when the budget was approved by the Budget Committee in May. So adjustments to the approved budget are limited pursuant to ORS 294.456, and those are the following: reduction or elimination of any requirement or proposed expenditure, increase in expenditures by not more than $5,000 or 10%, whichever is greater, of the Budget Committee approved total in each fund, and increases in expenditure by more than $5,000 or 10% of any fund by republishing the budget and hold a second hearing before July 1st. The 2018-19 approved county budget totals $78,036,610, and this includes unappropriated ending fund balances of $4,548,830 in the Special Projects Fund and $3,570,620 in the General Fund. The board has approved appropriation authority in the amount of $69,917,160. At this time, staff recommends that the board hold the public hearing on the 18-19 approved county budget to consider testimony from any and all persons.
Thank you for that staff report. We have some public testimony tonight. If you would like to testify on the Clatsop County budget, please come forward. We have a couple of guests tonight. You can either come up, do you want to come together or?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, the way I look at this packet, it says that we need to move that the board hold a public hearing on this budget to consider testimony. So maybe we need to do that before we hear the testimony?
No, you need a motion to open the public hearing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, I move that the board hold the public hearing on the 2018-19 approved county budget to consider testimony from any and all persons who may wish to make comment pursuant to ORS 294.453.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to open public testimony. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Welcome. So Robert, since you're presenting together, I'll kind of bend the rules a little, and I'll just go ahead and give you 3 minutes each, which would be 6 minutes. Does that sound fair?
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Welcome.
Sure.
Thank you.
Just speak into the mic, please, both of you.
Can you hear me? Great. Okay, we're here tonight as your Clatsop County Human Services Advisory Council. Dr. Mushin is our chairman. And first, we'd like to thank you for the $15,000 that you've already put in the budget for contributions to outside agencies. We know that there are limited funds available in the budget, and Clatsop County has many needs, and we're here to ask you to increase our amount. Sometimes it seems that budgeting funding to contributions to outside agencies is making donations to a few worthy agencies that do good things. I would suggest to you a different perspective, one that would give a better accounting of what really is going on. Rather than agencies coming to us and receiving a handout of money for their budgets, there's a rigorous procedure that they have to go through in order to qualify to be eligible for consideration. The application for funding asks organizations to clearly demonstrate how money they receive will save the county money in the long run. The actual wording of the application is, how do your services save money that might be required to be spent by the county if you didn't provide the service? That means dollars given to these organizations are not donations, but rather a collaboration to save county money in the long term. Another important part of the application process is making sure that these organizations reflect the goals of our county. Applicants must provide support and services to the citizens of Clatsop County that is consistent with the Clatsop 2030 vision together. In evaluating applications, weight is given to collaboration, meaning any money that's awarded would be leveraged for the biggest bang for the buck. In other words, the dollars that are given to these programs through Clatsop County grants are matched by dollars from other sources, thereby allowing the money given by the county to be able to purchase more services than it would if the county were solely to provide those services. Rather than thinking of this money as donations to an agency, it might be better to think of it as subcontracting to outside agencies to save county money in the long run. These contracts made with each of the agencies that receive dollars as successful applicants, they are required to report outcomes in a timely manner and allow site visits to ensure fidelity. In the past, when agencies were not able to fulfill their obligations, that money was returned. So instead of thinking of contributions to outside agencies as throwing money at successful winners of the funding lottery, a more realistic viewpoint would be to consider that the funding as a way to leverage the precious budget dollars by contracting with outside agencies rather than add to the tasks of county staff, as well as alleviate some of the strain of the county resources. But beyond the fiduciary benefits of increasing contributions to outside agencies, there's a human benefit. One key component of a successful applicant for funding is to show how their program will help prevent or provide early intervention for delinquency. Research shows that delinquency prevention programs are a good financial investment. Prevention programs save taxpayers $7 to $10 for every dollar invested, primarily due to reductions in the amount spent on incarcerations. Early intervention programs like those supported by contributions to outside agencies can prevent money currently spent to incarcerate individuals. While additional money is what we're asking for tonight, it is the human cost that is the benefit that does not and cannot have a price tag put on it. With early intervention, each one who makes a choice to be a productive member of society because of the mentoring that they received by participating in Lunch Buddies cannot be measured by dollars alone. Lunch Buddies was only one of 6 worthy groups that you were able to help this year. With increased funding, Clatsop County will be able to reach out and fund more worthy organizations, and by extension, help more at-risk youths with interventions. That will save untold heartache for them, for their families, and the community as a whole as incarceration rates go down. Now, we're here tonight asking you to increase the amount that is budgeted to the contributions to outside agencies and fully restore the budgeted amount of $30,000. This was the amount that was budgeted 6 years ago, prior to the downturn in the economy. By taking this action, the Clatsop County Commissioners will make a substantial and priceless difference in the lives of residents of Clatsop County. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you.
I'm primarily here to support my sharpest and deepest thinker here, Linda, but I would like to make a couple of extra points. One thing is we take very seriously the amounts that we recommend to you folks. We screen every applicant very carefully, and we try very hard to equitably dispense the funds that you so generously give us. Another point is that prevention, an ounce of prevention is worth a ton of cure in this case. We very carefully try to include early childhood programs and things that can be associated with prevention and child rearing. Third of all, we'd very much like to ask you for the $30,000 and implore you to think about it carefully.
Thank you for your comments. Is there, yeah, have a good day. Thank you. Is there any other public testimony?
Could I just say one thing?
Sure.
Dr. Mushin?
Yes.
Commissioner Mushin? I just want to take this opportunity, with no disrespect to you, ma'am, but to publicly honor you and thank you for the enormous difference you have made in your communities, wherever they are.
Thank you very much, Leanne.
You're welcome.
Okay, I will now close the public hearing, and budget adopted is scheduled for June 27th. Our next item is...
I have a question. So at that time, we can make that decision.
Can we, go ahead.
Yeah,
How does that work?
You can make a decision on this request at the next meeting. You want to give us some direction tonight, we can come back to you with a revised budget, or you can wait until June 27th.
Okay, well, I have some comments about it. Yeah, I was just listening to a program on NPR it was about, the children that are being separated from their parents at the border. And psychologists were talking about the younger the children are, the more devastating it is for their long-term ability to function as responsible citizens. And that's why these programs help at earlier ages. The earlier, the better. And if we could get it at birth, it would be even better.
Prenatal.
Prenatal, absolutely. If there are programs that come up like that, that would be a big savings for our societies. I would actually like to ask for more than the $30,000, because 6 years ago, that was $30,000. I'd like to ask for a little more, because costs are higher now. So that's my input.
Okay. I think by consensus, we'll go ahead.
I have more.
Please.
So my concern is similar. I mean, my professional career has been dealing with a lot of the programs that you talk about. My volunteer career has dealt with those programs. I am very familiar with what you're saying. I'm in accord with what Commissioner Nebaker says. My concern is not that these programs don't work. My concern is we are not adequately funding them as a community. And how do we look at that? If we give $15,000 or $30,000 or $50,000, is that enough? So I really wish we knew what is the scope of the unmet need in this community. That's what I'd like to know. I don't know how we get at that, but I think rather than say, let's give a little or a little more or something more generous, how do we know what's the unmet need? How do we know how to make this a more livable community for everybody, particularly the most vulnerable people in it?
Well, we certainly do know that we have these problems in our community, higher than a lot of the other rural counties, and I don't know how we would assess all of this, but I think CBH would tell us they can't meet all the needs. But that's why these early intervention, these early programs are so essential, because down the road it will help alleviate some of those more expensive later problems into adolescence and adulthood. So it's a good start.
Well, I think we'll go ahead and direct staff to come back with a $30,000 figure. Does that sound good, folks? We can have that conversation at the next meeting.
I have a question. And I commend Linda Crandall for your statement. And the points that you made in your statement, is that, I know that we have discussed as a body before that these decisions of where this money goes is made through the Human Advisory Committee. Are those statements of what's required, you said is on the application, is there a written policy somewhere where it shows A to B? Because I asked that at the Budget Committee and the answer wasn't known at that time.
We pulled it up at the Budget Committee. There is a written policy.
Yeah,
There's a written policy that the Human Advisory Committee makes a decision, but do they then have the points of how they make that decision? So that's in writing is what you're saying to me?
Well, I can't tell you off the top of my head exactly what is in the policy. Did you pull that from the policy?
I pulled it from the application.
Oh, so it says that on the application.
So it's on the application, but not necessarily written in a separate policy? Because I would like to see.
No,
There is a separate policy.
Yeah, we pulled that up when that question came up at the Budget Committee. We pulled the policy up and read it and shared it with the Budget Committee at the meeting.
Because I don't remember
We didn't
that
have
being
written
read.
copies to.
Yeah, I can.
Could I get a written copy?
Yeah, I can email it to you.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
And I'd like to make something clear. As the Human Services Advisory Council, we make recommendations to this body.
Right.
And you as a body then either take our recommendations or don't. So, but we don't actually give the money out. You guys give the money out. We just do your legwork and your
Thinking.
your legwork.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that point, once those decisions are made, I mean, we have written agreements with the folks who receive the money. Again, we don't just hand them the money. We have contracts. They have performance things that they have to meet, and we ask them to report, and we follow up on those things.
And we have had.
And I'm not suggesting otherwise, I just would
Yeah.
like to see it.
And we have had, in years past, there was a few years back, an organization that applied and received the funding and was not going to be able to meet the obligation and returned those funds. So it is monitored.
I would still like to propose that we increase the amount, not just to the 30,000, but beyond, because of the times. 6 years have passed. And while I know someone at the budget hearing said, well, what's the difference between 15,000 or 1 million? Or, you know, if we can't meet every need, then why bother? I mean, that's kind of what it, but I don't agree with that, because for every bit of money that we allow for this, there's a child that's being helped. And it makes a difference. So I would like to see it increased even more.
If you have a number, we're going to need a specific number.
5,000 more.
So 35,000?
So we're going.
No, wait. This, I'm really uncomfortable that we just keep adding and adding and adding without having data about this. I mean.
There's lots of data.
Well, but we haven't made a data-driven decision. So we've gone from 15 to 30, and now we're saying, okay, and now we want more. So I don't think that's a good process. I mean, I fully understand the human cost and the cost in the community health, but this is a budget process. And I would like us to have a budget process that is thoughtful and doesn't keep just getting pushed to increase this. I mean, I know you're passionate about it, and I mean this with all respect.
This was at 30,000 for years, 6 years ago prior. So others have vetted this. Then it went down to 7,500. It took 3-4 years of my pleading to get it just doubled. Think of all the children that have not been served during this time, that could have been helped, that will perhaps, some of them eventually end up in the prison pipeline. I do not think that it is responsible or prudent or wise to see this as merely a budget process. And this is part of the budget process. We're doing that. So I really implore the commission to fund this.
So staff will come back with a couple, I'm looking at Heather shaking her head.
Well,
You've got to approve the budget at the next
meeting,
hearing.
so we
You
know-
have
we
no
need to know
choice.
what-
It's got to be approved next meeting, so you've got to know what's going to be in it.
So my question, seems like the two numbers that are out there are 30 and 35,000. Is there any consensus around?
I would make a proposal that
those
we fund it at
numbers?
35,000.
We doubled it to 30. I'm comfortable staying at 30. I'm not comfortable to increasing it beyond that.
The Budget Committee, one of the points that was made at the Budget Committee, and I'm just putting this out there, is that we have increased different agencies, I don't have it in front of me, that they've increased services by adding personnel, and that is also helping the social needs of the community. And this is on top of the increases that we have seen in the budget. Do you remember what I'm talking about, Monica?
Yeah, we're adding FT to different programs. Is that what you're referring to?
Right, yeah.
Yes.
And then we also, in a separate matter, the homelessness fund, which I don't believe we have written policy yet on, that there was some discussion that perhaps their money could be, that to me is a social service also. Is that going to be a separate line in the budget compared to this budget? I mean, are those two different lines, and if we increase that, then, I mean, that's confusing to me. How is that going to?
I'll be coming to the board at the next board meeting, presenting what your options are, because you are limited with some options per budget law as to what we can do. So at the previous board meeting, there was conversation as to what we can do immediately and then what we can do for the fund. And so I'll be coming to the board at the next meeting with what some different options are to get some direction as to what you want me to do there.
So would that be also possibly written directions on, getting money before we even sell the land, or having how the person is chosen, and is there going to be any leveraging of these funds, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, we'll have that. I don't know if we'll have it in 2 weeks. But again, we're not necessarily making decisions in 2 weeks. We're just trying to get some direction from you as to how you want us to handle these things.
Okay, well, I will repeat what I've said in the past, is I would like to have a written policy of where the money comes in, how it goes out, what's the criteria to, who decides what that money is doing. Are we going to be helping with rents? Are we going to be, like if we give you $5,000, you have to have it matched by other funds. What are the options here? So we get the biggest bang for the buck.
Sure.
So getting back to the human services granting to outside agencies, I simply do not understand why we would not spend money now, a little money now that can be leveraged, double, triple, quadruple, and save money for the county down the road. I just don't see why we wouldn't do that. To me, it's
I don't know.
no-brainer.
I'm thinking we got the votes for 35. We'll ask staff. We'll go 35. We'll see. And
Is someone going to make a motion then?
we don't have to make a motion.
It's not an action item.
Yeah.
We're just looking for-
I'll bring before the board any recommendations that have been presented to me prior to that meeting, and then at that time, you guys
That's
can.
the final point where we decide.
So the budget committee said 7,500, right?
No, the budget committee said 15,000.
We doubled it from last year, from 7,500 to 15.
It was at 15,000 this current year, in 17, 18.
But that was increased last year.
From 16,
7,500.
17, yes.
In the current fiscal year.
Yeah.
And so for this fiscal year, we're talking about,
For 18, 19, you're talking about moving it from 15,000 to 35,000 is what.
That's what
the proposal is.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we'll talk about it for adoption scheduled for June 27th. Is there any more questions for staff? Okay. Budget adoption is scheduled for June 27th. Now we're going to move on to the fiscal year 2018-19 4-H Extension and Service District budget. This is a time set for a public hearing. Is there any public testimony on 4-H and Service District budget? Seeing none, I will now close the public hearing. Budget adoption is scheduled for June 27th. Now I'm going to, this is a time set for a public hearing on the 2018-19 Rural Law Enforcement District budget. Is there any public testimony? Seeing no public testimony, I will now close the public hearing. The budget adoption is scheduled for June 27th.
Do we have an option to ask a question on this, or?
Did you want to ask staff a question concerning?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm not.
This is concerning rural law enforcement, right?
Right, and I guess it's the form that you gave us. There's several other ones that are on there, but under the personnel on the grid that you showed us. So that's $3,028,630.
That's both personnel, materials and services, and capital.
Okay, and so then the special payments, are those grants?
No, those are payments that are made to another fund. This is a district, and so we can't just transfer money from a district to like the general fund or another fund, because it's technically a separate entity. And so we have to do a special payment. So this is just transferring money to, I believe, this is going into the Special Projects Fund, so that, because rural law pays for a portion of all of the sheriff's office operations. And so they then make, so if a sheriff's office is going to be purchasing a car, they'll pay for a certain percentage of that car out of rural law enforcement district. So if they're buying a car that costs $52,000, rural law enforcement district is paying for half of that car.
Oh, I see, okay, because they're using it all.
Yeah, and that's the same for their personnel services. We don't actually pay for any FTE directly out of, we don't have any FTE budgeted necessarily in the rural law enforcement district. We just are paying for personnel costs that get transferred to the general fund for a percentage of this work.
Okay, the other question I have, and maybe that's part of what you were just explaining, is the contingency, and I saw that on the budget thing.
Yeah.
$2,150,700 in contingency fund. To me, am I not understanding that word? I'm looking at that as if you need it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's essentially a savings, and it's to build up reserves. And so the only real monies that rural law enforcement gets is they get some tax money, and then they also get some timber money. And so they have a separate advisory committee that encourages them to build up those reserves, because should something happen to the timber monies, then this district would.
So this is their portion of the contingency fund.
Right? Yeah, this is their contingency fund is $2,150,700.
Okay, so on the other budget, which we're not talking about right now, they had under law enforcement, they had vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
So that savings is in case they need the vehicles.
The other budget, as in like the county-wide budget.
Yeah.
So in that budget, they're purchasing vehicles.
Right.
And then in this budget, they are transferring special payment of $26,000 to help go towards that vehicle purchase. The contingency is money that they don't plan to spend in 18-19. It's kind of like their savings account.
Because I thought, well, don't we know if we need a new car that year or not? I mean.
They do, and so that's what the special payment is so they make the request for the new car out of the county-wide budget, and the rural law enforcement district is going to be paying for a portion out of that car. And so they're making this special payment to the general fund to help purchase that car. So this $26,000 shows as revenue in the county-wide budget.
Okay, so on all these special districts, the contingency fund is that special district's share of helping to do the savings account?
Yes, that's their money. That can't be touched by the county. That is that district's contingency reserves.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions on the rural law enforcement district budget? The budget adoption is scheduled for June 27th. Now is the time set for a public hearing on fiscal year 2018-19 Westport Sewer Service District budget. Is there any public testimony on the sewer district? Seeing no public testimony, I will now close the public hearing. Is there any questions for staff? Budget adoption is scheduled for June 27th. And finally, this is the time for a public hearing on fiscal year 2018-19 Road District Number 1 budget. Is there any public testimony? Seeing no public testimony, I will close the public hearing. Is there any questions for staff? See no questions, budget adoption is scheduled for June 27th. Thank you, Monica.
I'm still going to stay right here. You're not done with me yet.
I think I am.
No.
So now we're going to move on to the business agenda, which is the adopt proposed new floodplain previously exempt activities fees, page 439. May I have the staff report, please?
As a result of the recent FEMA floodplain changes, it is necessary to make an adjustment to the existing fee schedule to collect a fee for the permitting and plan review of certain activities taking place within a floodplain. Previously, these activities were exempt from the permit and review process, And as a result of this new requirement, many activities on the landowner's property will create a significant financial burden. In an effort to promote compliance as well as recognize this financial burden, county staff is proposing nominal fees for these services. In most instances, this fee will not cover the cost of county time, but will be absorbed by the general fund. Pursuant to ORS 294.160, it's necessary that the board allow an opportunity for interested persons to comment on the enactment of any ordinance or resolution prescribing a new fee or a fee increase. Following the public comment and after consideration of these comments, county staff requests that the board adopt the proposed new fee with an implementation date of June 20th, 2018. And the proposed fee increase is $50, and it is called the Floodplain Previously Exempt Activities Fee.
Okay, so is there any public comment?
I have some questions.
Okay.
That's after the public comment.
Yeah, just ask for public comment. And then do you have, is there any questions for staff from the board?
Yes.
Thank you. So this is, remember when we had a meeting or so back when we had the public person asking about painting, and that's what this is about?
Well, I'm going to let Gail come up to address this. It is about that, but I'm going to let her, because I remember her making a comment as to how they would monitor that sort of activity.
Okay, so there are 7 activities that are currently exempt. Things putting in road signs, which means the county's now also going to be paying this $50 fee. Regular maintenance and repair that doesn't increase the size of a structure, doing floodplain restoration or wetlands restoration, small accessory buildings, putting in driveways, and I forget the other 2, but there are 7 of them. The intent, and it is not to go after people and require them to get a permit because they're changing screws, because they're changing windows. What we're concerned about are the structural things that will impede the flow of water. So painting obviously is not something that is going to impede the flow of water. I know FEMA thinks it will, but, you know, I'm trying to think of a good example. So I guess, you know, if you maybe had a flood vent or you had a window in your basement and now you decided you were going to block that, you know, that I think we'd want to see, because FEMA will have a concern about how a foundation is maybe being blocked off or something. Again, this is all new territory for us as staff, and we are feeling our way through it as well as you are.
So the new FEMA is required different procedures are asking for more permits to be drawn for different changes in people's land, right? What's the $50? I thought it was, I guess I was confused. When you said, Monica, there's a...
Well, I just gave you one page I gave you the whole schedule for the community development fees, but the one that's highlighted, or the one that's in red that says floodplain previously exempt activities, $50. Is it in red?
No, here.
Oh.
Oh, here, I see it. Okay. All right.
That's the new fee.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we're just talking about that $50.
Yes. Yeah, that's the only new fee. We have to, it's included in their whole fee schedule. And so I tried to highlight it, but I might have forgotten to tell Teresa to print it in color for you.
And also, so in the process of the public needing to apply for these permits, it's going to cost the county more staff time to process those permits. And what you're saying is that the $50 is not going to cover it, that the cost will be covered under the general.
It'll be absorbed by the general fund,
Okay,
yes.
so, because I wasn't clear when you said the financial burden, who's the financial burden, if it was the public or it's us?
Well, it's kind of both, because this is a financial burden for them, because previously they could have done some of these minor things without having to come and get a permit, and now they'll have to get a permit, and so the financial burden, if we were to make it the cost of the county's time like we do with a lot of other fees, it would be significantly more. So in an effort to have people come in to be compliant, but yet not totally overwhelm them with fees, staff was able to come up with a $50, and I believe the board, I believe you guys were a part of that decision, yeah.
So are we expecting to have more staff to go out and check this stuff, or?
Well, we do have budgeted in the 18-19
That's what I
fiscal
thought.
year, the code compliance person.
Okay, so that's a new position.
Yeah, and an
that starts in
additional
July.
building inspector.
That's not a new position.
That's not a new
No,
position?
Commissioner Birkby got a code compliance position before.
It's not a
It went
new-
away for a while, ma'am.
Yeah.
It went away for a while because of staff changes. That position had been in the budget before for other code compliance issues.
So.
It is a previously existing position, but we haven't had it for several years. It's one of the ones that, when we were reducing staff due to the downturn in economy, that was one that kind of,
No, Commissioner Birkby was crystal clear to her community in South County that she had worked. So maybe we're not talking about the same downturn because she was in office after that downturn. Commissioner Birkby was very interested in getting a code compliance officer. It was only a funny twist of fate that his name was Bart Catching, right? But at a certain point, his code compliance function went away. It is now proposed to be returned.
Okay, because that's good, thank you.
Okay, if there's no more.
I have a question, because I'm looking, I think I understand some of Commissioner Sullivan's confusion. When I look at the fiscal impact statement that's on page 439 of our packet, it says, should this fee not be implemented, the negative impact all the general fund would be greater. Did you mean on the general fund would be greater?
yes.
Okay, good, thank you.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, we'll look for a motion.
Shirley, I move to adopt the proposed floodplain previously exempt activities fee to be implemented effective June 20th, 2018 as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt the proposed floodplain previously exempt activities fee to be implemented effective June 20th, 2018 as presented. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And finally tonight, on our business agenda, we have item 8B, authorized foreclosure of transient room tax liens, page 443. May I have the staff report, please?
Commissioners, I'll present that, and we'll have staff here to answer questions. This is for authorization for County Council to file a lawsuit on a person who has been renting out both a residence and a yurt at various times. The yurt isn't always rented on her property. When you commissioners may recall, we did this last year, I believe, on another property owner who was renting out the money, collecting the tax, and not renting out the property, collecting the tax, and not giving the tax to the county, but keeping it. And we proceeded with foreclosure and were paid. In this instance, this particular property has come to the commissioner's attention before. In the slides you saw from the building official when we were talking about the need for short-term rental regulations as far as electrical code violations and sewer code violation, or need for a sewer or septic tank that worked, need for emergency ingress and egress, things like that. And there were pictures of this particular property. The lodge rents for $295 a night. In the summer right now, it is, according to Airbnb, fairly well booked for July, some rentals in June. Again, it's been since 2016 and taxes have not been paid. And we would ask the permission to be able to file the complaint. Normal tax foreclosures don't require the authorization to council to do that, but this is out of our room tax, which is not statutory. It's from our own ordinance, and so therefore it requires bringing it to the board for approval to proceed against this individual.
Mr. Chair. This is a constituent of mine, referred to me by State Representative Deborah Boone. I've had several conversations with her in person, on the telephone, over Facebook. I repeatedly urged her to do the right thing and work within the rules. So all of those contacts have left me with no bias for or against. I feel comfortable that I can make a decision based on the facts and the law. Thank you.
You want to make a motion? If you want. If you don't, I understand. It's up to you, Commissioner.
That's why they pay us the big bucks. Does staff have anything else? Do you have other things?
I have some questions. So I had those questions. You answered that, Counselor, that because it's a short-term rental, it falls under our jurisdiction. So this is, because normally when we foreclose, this is not what happens, right?
Right.
And this wording here, that plaintiff has no plain, adequate, or speedy remedy of law, it would be necessary to sell all of the land to satisfy this claim of lien. What does that mean?
Our pleading language goes back to Old English, what it means is there's no alternative for us to collect the money other than to proceed against our lien because she hasn't paid, and that we can't separate a piece of the land, that we need to foreclose against all of it, and not, you just can't take a piece because you can't, under our planning rules, just divide a piece of property. You know, we couldn't just take the house. So it says we need all of the land and we don't have any other option but to foreclose our lien and take that land, any other viable option. I should also point out to the Commission that she does have a first mortgage on this, which will be ahead of us. In other words, the property is if we sold the property, the county would have to pay off the mortgage and then sell the property itself. But the property is appraised by our assessors team as being significantly more than what is owed to the bank.
One thing that I'd like to just point out and remind you about the transient room tax is that it is a tax. It's part of her, she rents it for $295 and then the tax is on top of it. So when someone uses the property, they pay her the tax. And so this is not her money, this is money that she's collecting on our behalf. And sometimes that kind of gets lost in what we do, so I just wanted to make that very clear.
And this lawsuit is, the county has been working with this individual for 2 years.
Longer than that.
And has not found remedy. So this is the next step in trying to get this, is to do a lawsuit, and then she will have to defend herself in court to answer the charges. Is that correct?
Or pay.
Or come in and pay.
Pay. Okay. All right. Thank you.
So.
And the hope is that she comes in and pays and doesn't lose her land?
Well, of course.
Just putting that on the record, because I'm...
Yeah, we don't want the property.
Absolutely.
We just want to get paid.
Yes.
Is it determined by something online as to how many nights it's rented?
Yeah, I'm just reporting what I think it's on the last page here, what Airbnb website shows as being occupied.
And has she refuted this?
Pardon?
Has she refuted this? Because I believe that when I could be wrong, but if an owner X's out, it's not available, it could be either they don't want anyone in there, or it could be that it's being used by family, or it could be that it's rented. So has she...
Oftentimes on Airbnb, there'll be comments by the owner, come rent me. So I don't think that this is the case. Alicia could speak a little bit in more detail because she's who speaks with Jody regularly and also monitors our transient room tax.
So it's just, I just want to make sure it's not a situation where she's not adequately interfacing with the technology.
No, well, we review Airbnb and VRBO and those calendars, absolutely. But this is, in most cases of transient, in all cases of transient room tax, it's self-reporting. So this individual.
Self-reported?
Right. So what happens is every quarter I send them a return and they report to me what their gross receipts were.
Who's they?
Whatever tenant. So in this case, Jody would be reporting to us what she collected in rents.
Oh, so she does that?
Right. So she does do this, and in some cases she doesn't. And if she doesn't, I send her reminders, and there's penalties for not reporting. And there has been cases where she's gone to the point where I've had to audit. But these, I've never not had communication with her. It's always been, you know, documents her submitting to us. And so there's definitely clearly documentation from what she's rented. She submits to us reports from Airbnb showing what her rentals are and her calendars and what she claims is being rented. So this is all self-reporting.
Has she given any reasons why she doesn't pay it?
Lack of funds.
What?
Lack of funds, just stating that she doesn't have the money to pay it.
So she doesn't manage her money well.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I mean, there's a, not on the tax side, although also on the tax side, there's a pretty long history between the county and this property. You know, skirting the rules, violating the rules, shutting them down, opening back up illegally. You know, this has kind of been going on for years.
We found her in 2015, the ad, but she'd been renting since 2012 at that point. So this has been something that's been ongoing for a while.
Okay. Unfortunate.
Somebody want to make a motion? Sarah, you want to make a motion?
No. But, okay, I will. I move to authorize County Council to file a foreclosure action against Jody Underhill for non-payment of transient room tax. Second.
We have a motion and a second to authorize County Council to file foreclosure action against Jody Underhill for the non-payment of transit room tax. Is there any further deliberations or comments? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And finally tonight, okay, that concludes our business agenda items. Commissioner reports. Commissioner Nebaker.
Uh-huh, okay. Let me find here what I have written. Excuse me. Okay. So, let's see. One thing I did is I attended the Clatsop Community College dedication for the Royal Nebaker Gallery. His name is now on in letters on the outside of the building at the entrance of the Art Center. It's my hope that future generations of students and people passing through those doors will ask who this was and will learn about him and his untiring dedication to education, community involvement, mentoring, bringing people together for the greatest good and pursuit of the arts at the highest levels. And I'm hoping that people will be inspired by this example and follow it. Last week, I had the honor of awarding a Royal Nebaker Scholarship to a deserving high school student. This young woman, a junior at Seaside High School, was awarded the scholarship based on her visual arts submission. However, I happen to know something else quite remarkable about this young woman. So she's a junior in high school now. When she was 12 years old, she lobbied the Oregon State Legislature through letters and attendance during sessions, asking them to dedicate one day each year to honor the artists, and promotion of arts and education, and she prevailed. So there is a day in April every year now that's dedicated for this. I also met with Dan Gaffney for 2 hours, going over in depth his presentations that he gave to the commissioners last month, but I was not able to attend the meeting and I could not hear what he said when I called in. It was really informative. I was really glad I got some supplemental materials. And actually, he presented a lot of statistics from the state regarding costs to the state and the federal government when children are at risk. And the effects of these children are not mitigated. So what we were talking about tonight, is germane to what he was talking about. And I'd also like to ask, are there possibilities for improving the communication here when we call in? I mean, I couldn't hear anything. I could hear one word here and there. And I expect there will be other times that, you know, commissioners won't be able to attend but would like to call in, and we have attorneys and other people who advise us that have to call in.
So I spoke with the IT director regarding that, and like right now, I feel like I'm screaming into the microphone. I'm not talking, but it's very loud. And apparently these types of microphones, you have to be right on top of it. And so there were times when you were able to hear the commissioners, like when Commissioner Lee grabbed the microphone and stuff, so you were right on top of it. So then if I gave my whole presentation this way, you would most likely be able to hear me. But as we're presenting, we kind of start to lean away from it, start to talking, show stuff, and then as soon as it's gone. So apparently the way that when the phone is listening over the microphone, it's going to be attracting the noisiest thing. So if you're too far away from the microphone and there's something else closer to another microphone, then it's going to pick up that noise. So so it is something that we kind of have constantly gone back and forth with. We've tried the cordless microphones, and that way people that way people are holding it right here. We run into problems with those because the batteries, they go through batteries really quickly. And so it is something that the IT department is aware of. As to a perfect fix, they're still trying to find that. But the main thing is staying right on top of the microphone and speaking into it.
Well, good to know they're working on it.
Yes.
Hopefully we'll get it fixed. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Clement?
Two things. First, I want to ask, I've been asked multiple times by a lot of my constituents, mostly the folks living in Lewis and Clark, regarding the light at the bridge of the intersection of Lewis and Clark Road and Fort Clatsop Road. It's put up due to the bridge repair, and they're asking how is it triggered, if anyone knows. And this is something that if someone can get back to me sometime.
Wait, I'm sorry, where is this
I'll
light?
follow. It should be a motion trigger, but I'll follow up with you.
Yeah, camera or weight, they're asking. And it's, if you go out Lewis and Clark Road, and you take a right on to get to Fort Clatsop Road, before you get to Logan Road, they're repairing the bridge there.
Is that the Natal Grange Bridge?
I don't know the name of it.
Yeah,
When you live here, you don't know names of things. Like, you know, you don't know streets' names. And anyway, we go there to take care of our animals. Our farm is out there. And I've been stopped there at the red light for, I don't know, it feels like a really long time, but it's longer than normal, and move the car back and forward and there's no one coming up, and I know what they're talking about, so they're just curious how is it triggered and what they can do, and it doesn't feel right going through the red light, but when you're there forever and there's no one coming and there's not even a tractor in sight, what do you do? So I understand their concerns, so if someone can just let me know, and I'll let them know. I think I was asked like 6 or 7 emails, so a lot.
I'll follow up on that and try to get some more information.
And then it was graduation week, and it's really exciting because Astoria High School had the highest four-year graduation rate in more than a decade.
That's great.
At 75%.
Well, that's
The 75, but the Oregon average was like 60, and the Oregon average went up to 73.8 this year. So terrible, but better. And 75 for Astoria High School. And I think that's huge. And I haven't been to the school board meetings, but I think maybe part of it is from the Strive for 5 that as the school district implemented in the beginning of the year, where we're trying to get kids not to miss more than 5 days of school and support them in not missing. So education, teaching them when they're really sick and when they're not sick. And it's happening from the Astor School all the way up, and it's, I think it's a really good thing. So I know that there was a lot of education this year at the middle school about when you're sick and when you're not sick. and teaching kids that if you have a fever and if you're vomiting, then you probably shouldn't go to school. If you have a little sniffle, you should go to school. And there's a fine line. I mean, when there's not a lot of parental involvement, you have to teach the children, and I think that they're doing that. And the statistics are at least showing that we're inching up. We at Astoria High School are above the Oregon average, and it's still terrible, but it was exciting to hear that it's the highest graduation rate in more than a decade. So those are I don't know any other stats from the other schools, but hopefully they're following suit and helping that Oregon average go up. That's my report.
Great. Commissioner Sullivan.
Well, in terms of the high school, I was able to attend the musical the high school had, and that was a lot of fun. I also attended the graduation for the high school, and I also attended the alternative high school's education. They had a dinner for the graduates and their families at the Blue Scorcher, and I helped serve, and that was a lot of fun also. I think we don't always know the obstacles that people have to overcome in order to achieve what seems easy to somebody else. I also attended the Gay Pride Parade last weekend. And getting back to other things, I attended the Nehalem Bay, the Nehalem River Scenic Waterway Advisory Committee. It was down in Nehalem Bay State Park, and it's a series of public input in order to advise the next level of what they're going to do about that river. And the next meeting is in July. I attended the OSU Fisheries Tour. This is the second year in a row that they've had this. OSU put that together. We toured Bornstein's and went to where they had the emergency rafts, and we also saw the guy had the nets that I think is in the paper today. Beautiful picture, by the way. That was a lot of fun. I learned a lot there. And then yesterday I went on the water land tour. That was they invited the county commission, the county college class that I graduated from, and it was down in Tillamook, and we went and saw the oysters, and I don't have it with me because where they oyster farm, where they get the seeds for the oysters. That was really interesting. We went to a robotic dairy farm. We went to Stimson Timber Industries. We went and saw a working forest, and we also toured the new Tillamook cheese factory and had dinner there. And that was it was a long day, but we got a lot in, and it was very interesting. So.
When is it going to open to the public?
You know, I don't know. It's soon. It's not quite ready yet, but it's soon. But it's a beautiful facility, and I think they get, it's unbelievable the amount of tourism that they get. It's like 1.5 million or something. It's just
largest tourist attraction in Tillamook County.
It's crazy. I mean, it's just, and that's, you know, that was when I visited the Bornsteins. We could have had that here. It was, I mean, that was a fascinating. The Bornsteins is fascinating, and I also got to talk to Andy Bornstein about the housing that they've gotten for their staff, and I think hopefully in the future we can look towards some of these innovators and make a social plan about how can we increase capacity for housing. In our communities. You know, I know that Tillamook Dairies contributed a great deal of money to their housing study down there. And everybody that we talked to on all these tours were workers and housing always came up. So we'll have to see how we go. I have a homelessness task force meeting on Monday. So with that, I'll stop. Thanks.
Can I make a comment?
Oh, one more thing, but go ahead.
Oh, I was talking with a developer who actually lives in Washington, and he says he's developing property out on Clatsop Plains, housing.
Developments out there, yeah.
That will be more affordable.
That's great.
He feels that it's his civic responsibility to do this.
That's great. One of the commissioners that I graduated with, Phil, he's around Bend, and he's a builder by trade, and he talked about how what we expect for homes has changed so much compared to when if you go in my neighborhood where it was workforce housing, it's changed from people just needing shelter to having these little small palaces. Well, you can't make the same kind of money, so it is a question. But I wanted to bring up what Susanna Gladwin brought up about the audio for the minutes. I think it kind of goes along with what Commissioner Nebaker said, is how can we increase our capacity, and maybe this is something that we're working on. Are the meetings, is the audio for different meetings like the Planning Commission, is that put on the website? I mean, is that something that we could do, or?
Yes, we can certainly add it. We have not been putting those up because they do have the written minutes, but it's easy enough to put that audio up there as well.
Because I think, for me, when I want to go back and look at the county, our board meetings, it's really nice to have, of course, we have video too, but to go under the topic, that's been a big help. So I think anything we can do to increase public participation by just listening to what we're doing, and we're telling our story, and I think that's a good thing to do. Is that something that we can do?
But the Planning Commission meets in this room. Why couldn't it be video too?
I mean, I don't know what the requirements are. Would it be staff, or how would we do that?
Yeah, you've got to have the staff to be here to do it, but we'll take a look at that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Thompson.
Okay, the community club, the Arch Cape Falcon Cove Beach Community Club, had a safety committee meeting. During that meeting, we talked about getting a show your speed sign, and they've worked their connections. So now if you're headed south on Highway 101, your speed will be calibrated and reflected in the sign, just saying, just so you know that. We had a CERT MRC drill together in Cannon Beach to rehearse so that we get muscle memory on how to actually deal with emergency response situations. We had various scenarios, and we debriefed afterward. The state, did I forget? There was, Wednesday, May 30th. The Pacifica presentations were made at Seaside High School, and there were just, there's pages of them. And the students present, usually in teams, an amazing variety of connection to their community. And I recommend, if anybody gets the chance to evaluate those, they have community evaluators come in. It's enlightening, it's inspiring, and gives one hope for the future. So I'll put that out there. Then I went to the State Emergency Response Commission, which, as you probably remember, is under the Office of the State Fire Marshal. And you may also remember that we as county commissioners are legally accountable for hazardous materials inside our county. So we have a committee for that, but I would be more comfortable if I actually heard from them. So I would like to put that into the pipeline if it's at all possible. We're looking at lots of different hazardous material updates and efforts, and so that's a lot to talk about. I'm not going to go into that. Just know that your State Emergency Response Commission exists. We have local LEPC committees. They deal with hazardous materials. It's of concern to all of us. There was an Oregon Wood Products working group meeting Business Oregon comes to that. It's convened by Jason Lewis Berry of the Governor's Office. Sustainable Northwest is there. Woodworks, Oregon Department of Forestry folk. It has come about because the governor is interested in forest products as a significant source of the economic development that's in Oregon. So that committee continues to meet. Then I went to LeGrand because there was a Board of Forestry meeting. The next day, well, what do I want to say about the Board of Forestry? They're considering science, and it's very interesting because there's a lack of agreement on what is the sound science. And we could go on for hours about that. All I can say is the next day there was a tour, a mass timber tour dealing with the dry land forests in the Blue Mountains, because what they're doing at the Tallwood and Oregon State and the University of Oregon is working on using ponderosa pine, what they would think of as junk wood, in the middle, kind of like an Oreo sandwich. You put expensive dimensional timber on either side, and then the frosting in the middle is timber that's not so great. And what it does is provide economic value for what might be wasted otherwise. So that's an important development. I had long conversations with people about biochar and using that to clean water and have a beneficial impact on soil and use what would also be waste material. It turns out that there used to be money to develop community collaborations between environmental community and timber and forestry people. Well, they were able to find common ground. There was a sawmill that opened in Klamath Falls, for example, that had the blessing of all of the members of that disparate community that had been at odds with one another. So it is possible to work together to come to a good outcome. I hope that we can do that as well. There was an AOC housing meeting. There was a membership meeting. Commissioner Claire Hall from Lincoln County announced that she had helped gain $11.5 million in LIFT funds to pay for housing in Lincoln County. I said, how did you do that? She said, 14 years of effort. So when we look at the turnover in staff, we look at the turnover in commissioners, and we look at the cost of what we weren't able to achieve with continuity of service, it's considerable in our community, and that's the value of going to these meetings. That's the value of developing relationships and working those relationships, is eventually they pay off, but it takes a while. I was in another meeting and somebody said, who was willing to be quoted but not for attribution, oh, Clatsop County commissioners, they're kind of like goldfish. We don't bother to remember their names because they're not around long enough. And at first I was a little taken aback, and then I thought about the record of continuity that some counties enjoy, and I can see where if we did some more work to be more collaborative together, we would be able to have more continuity on the members of the governing body and in staff. So I think that would be a good thing. The AOC membership committee talked about not only developing more corporate sponsorship for the Association of Oregon Counties, but also how to help new commissioners coming in, because when I look at the commissioners here, I know that a couple of us have gone to county college. Some of us are active with AOC committees. It's really a good way to increase the impact of Clatsop County around the state and to improve the professionalism of all of us. Then there was the AOC all-day meeting, and those We heard a risk principle information sheet defined when we looked at how they look at evidence-based evaluation of how to help people stay out of prison. So I brought a copy back. I don't know who gets this at the county, but it seemed to me that it was useful information to bring back. They had information about opioids, the marijuana initiatives. There's a proposed National Association of Counties platform language to look at how we deal with cannabis all over the country. So we're looking at how to have more impact for local, county, statewide, and national. Also, I got to have fun. I went on that same fisheries tour, and that was, we had a bunch of people. The knot guy was fun. He knots up trawl nets, and that was really fun. But I got to tell you, the greatest and best fun, I got to go out on a charter boat because they had a tour of the marine reserves from the water. It was amazing. There's a whole map. We went onto the ship in Garibaldi, and we chugged all the way up to Cannon Beach. People fished, people crabbed. There was radar.
That was a different tour than I
That
got.
was a second tour. I know. First I heard the business side of it, and then the next day I got to be out on the ship. And I'm not going to tell you which Daily Astorian reporter got seasick, but it was not Jack. It was amazing to see the land from the Marine Reserve. And the captain of the ship had radar. And I remember the day before, Andrew Borenstein said, we are only processing 20% of the fish that we could be processing out of Astoria because we don't have the infrastructure. We don't have the machinery to process the fish, and even if we had the machinery to process the fish, we wouldn't have housing for the workers to run it. So the cost of not doing what we need to do about housing ripples through everything. They talk about the graying of the fleet, the graying of pretty much everything because youth can't afford to have housing here. I mean, we really have to do something about it. What else do I want to say? Oh, Saturday from 8 until 6, there's going to be an exercise in psychological first aid for people who want to know what to do in catastrophic situations. If you want to come to Cannon Beach and spend the day having fun learning how to deal with trauma, I think there may be room for you. That's all I'll say. Thanks.
Okay, I attended the Northwest Oregon Housing Authority regular meeting down in Tillamook, and it was nice to take a look at some of the properties down there, and Noah's doing just fine, moving along, building capacity. There's been some stabilization of HUD funding, which was somewhat of a surprise, and so we're not going to lose any vouchers. In fact, we're going to be probably able to do some expanding and paring down our waiting list. Attended the quarterly CREST meeting at the end of the last month, going into the budget process, reviewed some of the neat projects that's going on. One of the projects that's, I might have mentioned in one of the last meetings, but we've completed the Megler, right there by the Megler rest stop, there's a creek that goes under, and they've seen lots of fish activity in there. Small smolts are actually going under the culvert, and it's interesting that most of the outgoing salmon, for some reason, prefer the North Channel. And so we're working on a couple of other projects where that broken ship is over there. In that little harbor bay, there's a couple creeks that they're going to put some box culverts in to open up habitat there too. It's just neat to be, learn from the scientists in the field and talk with them. I've really enjoyed my time at CREST. Next Friday, there's going to be an Oregon Coastal Zone Management Association meeting. This is our yearly business meeting. I will, I'm term limiting out as chair, and so we'll have a new chair, and then I'm going to go be the liaison until the end of my term. And so I definitely hope that we're going to have some good representation on the Oregon Coastal Zone Management Association. It's a great group that I've spoken about a number of times here. There is the Center for Biological Diversity dropped a lawsuit suing the Department of Forestry. This is going to be pretty serious. I'm really concerned that our state forest here is going to go the way of Elliott. We've talked about this years ago. Coalition of groups, both environmental advocates and fishing industry representatives, sued the Oregon Department of Forestry, alleging the agency has failed to protect the habitat of coho. The group says logging practice permitted by the agency have degraded stream quality. The Center for Biological Diversity, Pacific Coast Federation of Fishermen's Association, Institute for Fisheries Resources, Cascadia Wildlines, and the Native Fish Society have all filed a lawsuit. The lawsuit specific to Oregon coast salmon and logging practices in the Tillamook and Clatsop State Forest. The groups that brought the suit hope the court will find an Oregon violation of the ECA, Endangered Species Act, and the suit aims to stop logging in the state forest until the agency submits a plan to better protect the threatened fish. So it's really important that we keep track of this as it works its way. To have our forest shut down for a year or two would be pretty catastrophic, to say the least. And finally...
Chair Lee, may I ask?
Please.
In regard to what you just read, I know that the Board of Forestry received the first grant in a 3-grant process to get an HCP. And I know that from going to those meetings, one of the things that they talked about, one of the reasons that Clatsop County is asking for an habitat conservation plan is in order to ensure that the funds keep coming in, that if we can set aside land and have that as our protected species for endangered species, that means we will be less subject to lawsuits such as what you're talking about. And as you said, the danger that we're worried about is when the lawsuits shut down large tracts of forest, then revenue does not come into the cities and the counties. And so that's why Clatsop County has been pushing for a habitat conservation plan in order to ensure that revenue can continue to come into the county and the cities.
That's exactly right, and the HCP is a good tool to mitigate against these kind of lawsuits. So this is going on for years. It'll just be like some other things that we've dealt with. So finally, Senator Merkley has really, I'm really proud of him and his stand against what's happening at the border of separating children from their parents. This to me, I've spent a lot of time in Latin America. I've spent a lot of time traveling over the borders, and I'm very familiar with what's going on there, and I really am thankful that Senator Merkley is taking some leadership here, and this is something that's really personal for me. The thought that we're, as a country and as allowing a government to separate children from their parents, these people are refugees fleeing violence and warfare, and it's just totally unacceptable to me. I was going to talk tomorrow to Cam about this, and I may bring forward a letter of support of Mr. Merkley's work, and so I'm going to talk to Cam about that tomorrow. It's something that's really important to me, and I think it's just should not be happening. And that's all I have. County Manager Moore.
Yeah, I thank you, Chairman Lee. I just want to take a few minutes here to talk about something that's really important, but we haven't talked a lot about lately, and that is the North Coast Crisis Respite Center. Just for background, I know I've mentioned this before, but the Respite Center is actually, it's operated by CBH, but it's governed by a community-based nonprofit. It's called the Caring for Clatsop Coalition. There's 4 members of that nonprofit, the Providence Hospital, CMH, Gobi, and the county. And so, we provide the oversight, if you will, for the Respite Center. And so about 2 years ago, I think it was about June of 2016, might have been July, the Respite Center opened. At this point last year, that first year had not gone well. The Respite Center, and you'll remember talking about this a year or so ago, but the Respite Center financially did not do well. It took a long time to sort of find its financial footing. Part of that was based on direction that the board gave to CBH about some different things that we would like to see happen there that would help stabilize the finances of the Respite Center. And I really wanted to talk about it tonight because I'm really encouraged by what's happened over the last year or so. We had a Caring for Clatsop Coalition board meeting yesterday. We reviewed, I'm kind of one of those people, I like to track everything, so we reviewed the statistics and how we performed in a variety of ways. And one thing, and again, while this sounds bad, it's much better than where we were a year ago, but from July 1st of last year through the end of April of this year, so not the entire operating year for the Respite Center, but at the end of April, we basically showed a negative of about $15,000. Now, at this point last year, that was hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we've come a long way, and I actually think we have a chance to break even with the Respite Center this year. That really kind of started late last year. I think it was maybe October, November, where the Respite Center really started to hit its stride. The census was up. We're maintaining the census now. The majority of people in the Respite Center are, in fact, Clatsop County residents. We had good statistical information. The other day, of course, hospitals were part of the discussion, that the amount of time that they're spending dealing with mentally ill individuals in the emergency rooms is down dramatically. These were all the things that people talked about, not all of them, but a number of the big things that people talked about when the Respite Center started. And while the first year was really rough, this second year is looking pretty good. And we'll come back at the end of the year. We'll ask CBH to come back and give a more detailed update on where the Respite Center's at. But when you consider where we were in 2016, when you consider where we were in June of 2017, and where we are today in June of 2018, it's been a pretty positive story.
That's really good news.
I just wanted to share that because I was really encouraged looking at all the data the other day that we have to be vigilant to make sure we keep operating in a way that is financially responsible. So I don't want us to, as a colleague of mine used to say, I don't want us to meet, declare victory, and go home. We've still got a lot of work to do there. There's a few things that were envisioned for the Respite Center that we haven't gotten done yet, and so we want to keep focused on those things. But we're in a pretty good place with the Respite Center compared to where we were.
Because last year, we lost almost 500,000, right?
Yeah, it was about $500,000.
And so this year, we're down to 15,000, and that's quite a change.
It's a huge change.
I would like to hear more information about it. So will we get a presentation or something on that?
Yeah, I'd like to maybe do a year-end one. So after the fiscal year for the Respite Center ends on June 30th,
June 30th.
Wrap up. So that could be July. It might be August.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Is that it?
So that's it.
Meeting's adjourned. Have a great night, everybody. Thank you.
We forgot to mention the music festival open this weekend. I brought you one of those.
Oh, good night.
What is this? I want tickets. I want another dinner. I want tickets.
Hey, I got a quick question about.
Thank you.
That was a fabulous thing.
What does she do? What?